Welcome to the Coaching Edge podcast with your co-hosts, Dr. Steve Jeffs and Erwin de Grave. Each episode, we bring you expert guests and transformative coaching insights. Let's dive in.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Coaching Ed podcast with your co-host Steve Jeffs and myself, Erwin de Grave. And today we have the pleasure to talk to Wendy Buckingham. Hello, Wendy. How are you doing?
Good, thank you.
Hello, Steve, as well. Welcome.
Hi, great to be here.
Good to be here.
So, Wendy, we could try to introduce yourself, but you're the person who knows yourself much better than we do. So, who's Wendy? How she became a coach? What she's doing in coaching?
Okay, well, I came into coaching, about the late 90s. I came from a background of doing a lot of personal growth work anyway, so coaching seemed a natural progression, although somebody had to tell me you need to be a coach, because at the time my husband and I were running a business as well. And I did the first coach training in Australia, or the second actually, out of Coach U. The first one was a live one, which I didn't do. The second one was all by teleclasses. And it was about 200 hours, and I loved every minute of it. And I got as much benefit from it myself as to being a coach. And I think that's why I always looked to Coach U, because it was the original, founded. So yeah, and I went out, and people didn't really know what life coaching was. In those days, there was no such thing as a niche. You were a life coach. That was all there was to it. So I just hung around and told people what I was doing. And the clients came quite easily, I must say, although I wasn't looking to build one of those huge six-figure businesses that we hear so much about these days. We still had a business we were running. But I really enjoyed it. And with what I learned and with my background was actually in, I'd been a secretary before they were called executive assistants. I'd done some voiceover work. I'm supposed to have an international accent. We had an audio video production business, and I was in that, doing stuff with that. And I'd also been a journalist with some of the freelancing and on staff with some of the major papers here. So I brought all that to coaching. And I also had worked with somebody who developed a goal-setting template, which was really quite unique in anything I'd ever come across. And I sort of integrated that very much into my coaching. So yeah, I just started coaching, and most of my coaching was either face-to-face or by phone, because there was no Zoom, no Skype. No, nothing. We're going back 25 years ago. It was just me. And I actually found I preferred phone coaching, because going against the grain a bit, I actually found it more intimate than face-to-face. And the clients were more inclined to say more. But I did have a couple of learnings with that as well, when somebody at the end in the evaluation at the end said, well, I'd rather have been face-to-face. So that was a bit of a blow. But we soon got over that. And I continued coaching and built it up. It was never, as I say, never a huge coaching business, but I got some great testimonials. I enjoyed what I was doing, and I was getting results. And then I suppose about 15 years ago, when we got out of our business, we went to the UK, and we were looking around for something else. And we decided to start a website about coaching, because when I'd looked at all the websites there were, a lot of them were schools, a lot of them were coaches trying to enroll people, but none of them were really just sort of objective information sites. So that's how my site, Life Coaching Professionally, was born. I still carried on coaching until about 5 or 6 years ago, and now I don't coach one-to-one. I think my last clients were in about 2020. But I sort of see myself as being a mentor through the site. I'm constantly updating it. It drives me mad sometimes, because things are moving so fast. And yeah, and I just started that up, and it's doing quite well. You know, I'm on #1 page in many sites, and I learned a lot about websites as well. But I think for me also, I've always just been a life coach. So life coaching professionally is about life coaching, because I sort of started to think that life coaching has become a niche within coaching. There are so many, so yeah. So I think that's about it. And then I started to, well, I can start creating books because I have a writing background. So I created 5 ebooks. The first one wasn't an ebook. I wrote Ready, Set, Goal. Oh, it must be about 15 years ago now. In 2000, I wrote it. Gosh, that's 25 years ago. And well, it was a bit later. I've lost track. I tell you, I don't know what day it is half the time. And I met somebody who'd written a bestseller, and she put me onto her publisher, and they picked up my self-published book, and they took it and published it, and it was sold internationally in India and places like that. And then when it sort of died off, I got the rights back, and then it became Be Your Own Goals Coach. And more recently, I thought, well, this is not the right niche. So I started to rewrite it specifically for coaches, and it became Mastering Goals Coaching. So yeah, that's what I'm doing these days. So next question.
No, you've been over 25 years in coaching, or in the coaching sector industry. What have you seen the evolution of coaching over those 25 years?
Oh, this is where I have to be careful. I've seen it become somewhat diluted from what when we all, a little group, did Coach You when we first started up. I was one of the first members of the ICF in Australia, and I was coaching credentialing officer. And I used to go out and talk to people about all that. But in some ways, I despair of the coaching industry these days, because it seems to have become very diverse and very blurred, and that you have to have and very complicated. Whereas I think that the skills of a life coach can be applied to almost any niche, paying attention to what your background is and what you can bring to it. And I just think the industry has become too complicated, and overlapping with therapy so much. And there are a lot of therapists in all the forums I look at. And I suppose I'm for regulation of life coaching specifically. I would like to see that, because it is very different from anything else. But I think it's wonderful that so many people want to do coaching. I don't think it's so wonderful that so many of them struggle to find clients. That I think is a big thing. I suppose, in other words, the industry has become very crowded, and you have to make your point of difference. And I think my point of difference, even when I was still coaching a few years ago, was I am a life coach. And on my website, I said how I apply this to small business, how I apply this to confidence, you know, how I apply this to careers, just a few things. And it seemed to work for me. I didn't actually need to go down the track of having a narrow idea. I coach anyone who liked the look of me and could pay my fee. So you know, yeah. But I also, the other thing I found, that the coaches are being preyed on an awful lot. Well,
What
you
do
know,
what do you mean by that?
well, you hear so much about, you know, DMing and cold DMing and things like that, offering to build websites, all things which are really valid. But I mean, there's an old saying, I don't know if you've heard it, but in the gold rush, the people that made the money were the people selling the shovels, not the people digging for gold. I think a little bit of that can apply to coaching these days. But yeah, otherwise, I still love it. I think it's a wonderful, it does a huge amount of good. I'd just like to see it simplified a little bit more.
When you say
What?
simplified, what do you mean more simplified?
What do I mean more simplified? The basic principles of life coaching can be applied. It doesn't need all these fancy extras put into it. You
Could you
can,
give an example?
oh, it becomes complicated. Now these days you have to study shadow coaching, which I still haven't worked out what that is, and various other add-ons. I mean, grief coaching, I think, is great, but it actually is, I think, that sort of thing, retirement coaching, they're all fine. But I see some that are so sort of obscure because people are encouraged to find a target a target audience that they actually miss out on finding anybody because nobody knows what the hell they're doing. But yeah, it's just, I think people take a deep breath, just get out there, start coaching, use what they've learned at a good school. And that's the other thing. There are so many questionable coaching schools around. And a lot of them also don't teach a business module. So the poor guys, they learn this stuff and then they're out there and they don't know what the hell to do to get clients. They don't even get the basics of let people know what you're doing. They think they have to do it on social media. They have to start a group. I mean, I noticed today one forum I was on, it wasn't coaches helping coaches. It was another one. And it was obviously not aimed at coaches. It was aimed at coaches helping each other, but all these coaches were advertising their services. So they had the wrong audience.
Mm.
They need to go where their audience goes. And I feel when I say simplifying, I think a lot of the marketing can be so simplified. And, they think they just have to build a website and it'll all happen. It doesn't. You have to have good SEO, you have to have content. Google is a nightmare. That's why I'm totally working on my site at the moment. Because you get right through one change in algorithms and then they go and change it again. So, oh God, I've got to go back and start every heading with a question or do something like that. So you must have found this. Am I making any sense?
Absolutely.
Or just
These are
or
things
just
we've
annoying you?
seen, we've heard. What, from your perspective, what gets lost when coaches are overcomplicating things?
Oh, the basic essence of asking questions, listening, responding to the question from your training with what to ask next. I don't think we ever get totally away from advice, but it has to be framed up as suggestions. Can we look at some options? Can I make permission is the key. And basically that I think comes a lot from experience, that if somebody, if you asks a question, they have to know what to do with the answer. It's no good. And that's where, and I firmly believe in training and certification.
Yeah, I think you've hit on an important component, at least in my, oh, you froze for a sec.
Well,
At least
you're
in,
an MC, I think.
correct. Yeah, I've done a lot of work with the ICF as a master coach. I think there's one thing that you've spoken to here that catches my attention, and that's the niching down or the advanced level, narrow focus training courses that are out there. And yet there's the essence of experience. You can't go to a course to get experience. You've got to live life to get experience. You've got to coach. You've got to work with your clients. And I see that getting lost as people focus on the next certificate, the next course, the next program, the next something else. So yeah, I'm aligned with where you're pointing. The essence of ask a question, listen, ask another question, let your expertise guide the next question and where you're going, but it's not about expertise or the coach.
The other thing I think that I've noticed happening a lot, and you see it a lot on the forums, if somebody thinks just because they've had a certain experience, they can coach around that experience. So they end up working through the filter of what's happened to them, and they're often not totally clean. Now, I've had a few, you could say, big experiences in my life, but no way would I attempt to coach somebody through based on my experience. My experience might help in the background, but just because somebody's experienced trauma and being cured without proper coach training and without being clean around that experience, if they still haven't totally processed it, they run the risk of the client comes to them and they're coaching them to be like them, so to speak. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah,
I
that
hear,
concept. Sorry, go ahead,
no,
Erwin.
I hear what I've heard in the past a lot, and I haven't heard it lately. It's like pure coaching. That's basically where I understand what I hear what you're saying. It's like the pure coaching. Just stay on the pure what it is. Don't use your experience to
I'm not saying that. No,
no.
no. I mean, your experience. I wouldn't dream of coaching in corporate because I've never coached. I've coached executives, but I haven't gone in as a corporate coach. In fact, I had one corporate client from a bank, and I had to ask her to start talking English, so I could understand what she wanted. And she did send me clients, so I can't have done too badly. Well, the bank is really important, but you need the training as well. And also, I mean, I had several friends who were MCCs, master coaches, and they all admit that once they do the course, they read about the pure coach, but then they do others as well. But it's how you frame it up. You can do coaching and consulting if you've got the business experience. You do that. Um, I'm just trying to think of another example. You can do mentoring if you've been there, done that the client wants to do. You can throw in your own experience there. But ultimately, you have to coach. And if you're going to offer advice or mentoring, you do it in such a way that the client still comes to their own conclusion.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah. What have you seen? And maybe you haven't seen anything, but if anything, what have you seen that helps coaches to integrate that experience, as your example just pointed to, while still being clean in how they bring that into the coaching?
I was just thinking of business. I wasn't thinking of, I suppose you can reflect back and say, I have experienced something similar to you, and I know this isn't your experience, but maybe you can consider some of these options. Or in the processes that are used, and I think, Coach, you talked some pretty deep processes. You help them find where their beliefs come from. And it's like, well, when did you first feel like this? And then you can get to it. And I think because of my background, the amount of personal growth work I've done, it will occasionally shift almost into therapy, but you have to watch it very carefully, and you don't ever tell them what to do, and then you won't need insurance.
Yeah, I hear a couple of things in there that I'm really appreciating. One is the clarity of self versus client. Where am I and
Yeah.
where is my stuff and where am I talking about me versus how do I self-manage that? I can use as a coach my experience, education perspective to inform the questions, but it's not about me, it's not about my questions, it's still about the client. And at the essence of all of this, role clarity feels important. Am I a mentor? Am I an advisor? Am I a trainer? Am I a coach? Because while they all can have alignment in intent, we show up differently and do different things in wearing each of those hats.
Yeah. And sometimes you can explain that to them, say, but I will always I think the line there is, I would always ask you permission. Can I give you some suggestions, or let's take a look at the options? Is that okay with you? And then you can make suggestions, or say, you can even say, look, I know how somebody handled this. So would you like me to tell you about it? It's actually all in the languaging, I think,
Mhm.
of how you present it. And I think, and it depends on the coach's innate ability to express themselves and be articulate with the client, not just roll off a whole load of questions. I can remember when I first started coaching, I had next to me a list of questions on a piece of paper, and it was like came from various exercises we'd done. And I used to start off by doing a thing we call the needs process. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, where you help the client identify what their basic needs are. And then from there, you can work out what might be driving their beliefs and things like that. But it all comes down to them doing the work. Or you might say, and I've had this said to me, I think you've got a need for control. And which sort of hit the button, but it wasn't actually the best way to put it. The question would be, do you have a need for control? Do you think you have a need? It's all you're a coach, you know how to do this.
Absolutely. It was a big focus for me during my master coach supervision process, was to notice the difference between the question I was wanting to ask and the words that I used to ask it, and to become more aware, intentional, and conscious about choosing the words that ask the question in service of the client and where we are in the conversation. But yeah, just that power of a communication skill of being able to effectively manage self, but not be focused on self, to pay attention, to be aware, and then to articulate that in a way that the client, from where the client is, because of course they're in their head, they're thinking, there's an experience that they're having. From where they are, the question helps take them forwards. Yeah, it definitely takes a lot of practice. It's I don't see us practicing a lot actually as coaches.
Well, no, and I think this was the thing with my training is we had to go through every single module ourselves of the training. And there was 2 months worth of learning to listen. So, because I think often coaches talk more than they listen. I know my first coach talked more than she listened.
Mm.
Listen more. At the same time, don't let them ramble on forever. You've got to keep control of the session.
Steve mentioned just a minute before about communication, and I was wondering in how far your previous experience before coach, being a journalist, how has that helped you as a coach to communicate or ask you questions better?
Well, I think it got down to discovering what my purpose were. There's all this thing about what is your big hairy purpose, and I never had one. And it suddenly came to me one day that my purpose was to simplify and educate. So that's where I come from when I want to keep, especially with my website, to keep things simple, down to earth, practical, and educate. And also, I think I can express myself, I think, fairly well. I've done quite a bit of seminars and public speaking and things like that. But it is a skill and it is a practice. And it's something that comes to you over time. I don't think it's either you've got it or you haven't got it. But that way of being able to communicate is about confidence and practice. And I think going on a certain amount of intuition as well, listening to what's not being said.
That's interesting. So could you go a little bit more in depth about about that intuition in coaching?
Well, I don't believe in coaching from intuition, let me say, but sometimes you can just sense either from facial expressions or if you're on the phone, the space that something is not being said, or you can look at your notes, or you have enough knowledge to know that a certain belief might come from somewhere, or you have the right question to ask to take the client forward a bit. And I know they teach intuitive coaching, but really it's just, I don't know if you can learn intuition. I just think as you experience coaching, you just get an instinct for what might not being said, or the path you might have to go down, or you might have a sudden thought, oh, I've just thought, could this be what's happening?
Yeah, I think there's so much power in intuition. The way I often describe intuition is it's information that we don't necessarily know the exact source for.
Yeah.
We don't really know where it's come from. It's not about right or wrong. And, through the lens of our discussion, to be able to not be driven by intuition and be purely intuitive and lose the logical, rational parts of what we bring, but to bring that information into the conversation in a way that the client can then start to do something with it. It's not a judgment, it's not an advice, it's not a telling, but hey, this is here. What does this bring for you, if anything?
You can have what I'm hearing, that horrible phrase. What I'm hearing is maybe this, that, or other. But you can't, I don't think you can coach totally by intuition. You have to have the skills and the training to do it as well. And when somebody says, I'm really intuitive, I can tell what's the matter with you. I think, oh yeah,
Is that intuition or judgment? Yeah, that's absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
Very
or not like judgment as opinion.
Yeah,
yeah.
I love it. Hey, I know a lot of our audience. So when I started teaching coaching training, we had to, teach how to coach on the phone because, of course, things were in person. Now it's all on Zoom. A lot of the places we're actually finding we've got to teach in-person coaching. But for those of us that have never thought about coaching on the phone, what are your tips for phone coaching? Because my kids don't even talk on the phone. It's all message. Are you talking about message?
Yeah.
How do you coach when you can't see someone is a question that I hear from coaches.
Well, you can hear them, and the voice gives away a lot. I mean, I've had clients in Germany, in the States, and places like that where we've had successful coaching sessions. And I prefer it to Zoom because I think Zoom can be, you don't get the whole picture of the person and it can be distracting. And also, I must admit, I like phone coaching because, I don't have to dress up or anything like that. I think it gets down to the listening again to what's not being said and letting them talk. Have I got what you were asking, or do you need to? I've gone off on a.
No.
You're in the right spot.
Well, I mean, I've taught by phone for after I graduated from Coach U, I was actually doing teleclasses for a while. And then you have people ringing in from all over the world. And I've done remote goal planning clinics. And it can work because you do get the tone and you do get the it's not like email where you don't get the tone or the essence of what's being said. Over the phone, you do get that tone and essence and intention. So I think it's a viable way to coach over the phone. In fact, I did most of my clients when we moved to the country, when I was getting clients through AdWords. I never met any of them.
Yeah, I'll often find that I coach better on the phone.
Yeah, really? Oh, that's interesting.
Because I'm focused on them. I'm not looking at what's in their background or what's going on. Or if I'm on camera, I'm not stuck in this tiny little box and thinking about what I'm looking at. And my clients are not thinking about that as well.
No.
There's a sense of, even to be able to walk around, for the coach and the client to be moving brings a whole nother dimension to the conversation.
Also, you can make little notes. I must admit, I used to coach on the phone with my laptop, and I'd be taking notes as we went, but they couldn't see me taking notes. So they weren't distracted by that. And yeah, I know one instance I met a client who had been coaching by phone through some quite intimate issues. And when we actually met, she clammed up. And all I could think was she felt that I knew so much about her intimately that was okay when I couldn't see her. And it sort of ended the coaching relationship. All of a sudden, she was embarrassed at the amount she'd told me. And I could feel it. I could tell that she was ill at ease. So phone coaching does have its advantages. Face to face is fine. I've done face to face. You have to.
It creates a
That's
certain
a
distance
really,
between the client feels more safe because they're not being looked at. Then there is not looked at. It's not face to face. There's on the phone. They feel there's a certain distance, creates some trust as well. On the other hand, I think it's a very good exercise for coaches to learn to listen.
Well, exactly. You have to listen on the phone. And also, but then there's the other argument that says, well, how can you, if you're not seeing the whole person, how can you coach them? And, I accept that for some people, and some clients want face to face. They can't imagine being coached the other way. So you give them that option. And I used to say, okay, well, we'll do one session on the phone and you can see how it works. And if you don't like it, then we can do it face to face. If it's feasible. I mean, if they're in Europe, it wasn't going to be feasible, was it?
well, the price goes up, absolutely.
If they'd like to pay my fare, why I go there.
Exactly. What I'm appreciating about this conversation is that so often as coaches, we focus on us and what we need to be able to coach. And there's real truth in that. And part of what this part of the conversation is pointing to is there's a lot of different options or ways that we can create the space for coaching. And to do that in design, in partnership with our clients to help them have the space that best support them in their coaching actually makes our shared purpose so much easier.
Absolutely. Yes. And people can join groups. You can do remote group coaching as well. I've done it. It can work. Yeah.
Have you done those group coaching?
Pardon?
Have you done group coaching?
Well, when I say group coaching, I had a remote group that used to ring in, and they had we'd help them set a goal and take them through a goals clinic and do that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was fine. You just have to get the number they can all ring in on, and each one says who they are and here I'm this. It's a bit similar. It's similar to a webinar without the visual. It's exactly the same. And you ask them to mute and everything like that. I mean, I like group coaching. I think it's a wonderful way to leverage. And in a way, my website's about group coaching. Leveraging it.
I love it. This has been really interesting. Wendy, for those people that are curious to learn more and would love to reach out, connect, or learn more about your work in simplifying and educating, how can people find you?
They can find me on my website, which is lifecoachingprofessionally.com. Of course, you've put all the other bits on the beginning, the HTTP, you don't need that. Yeah, they can find me there. There's a contact thing there. I've got pieces on finding the right training. I mean, if they go to the homepage, they can see whatever is there. And if they're thinking, who is the hell is this bird? They can go to my about page where I cover my life personally and professionally, but not quite as much detail personally. Yeah. So it's all there, and I still enjoy doing it. I mean, I suppose I'm semi-retired, but I still really enjoy going through it. And the challenge now is to meet the new algorithms that Google has put in. And I've actually realized I can actually use AI occasionally. I don't like it, but I can actually use it sometimes, to get information. And I suppose the main thing is I don't think I'm a purist, but I do want to keep the integrity of the coaching profession. And that is hard these days because everybody's calling themselves a coach. Yeah. So.
Well, thank you for holding this responsibility and bringing your expertise and wisdom in ways that can serve our current and next generations of coaches to connect to the essence of what it is that makes coaching so powerful. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Can I just mention, I also have a thing called Life Coaching Accelerators, which is a free regular newsletter that has more stuff in it. Whatever's going on, and sometimes it's something that's happened to me, and sometimes, but it always has a bit of help in it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Wendy. It was really nice talking to you, and to everybody else, until next time. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to The Coaching Edge. Until next time, keep coaching and keep growing.